Imagine waking up tomorrow and everything you thought life was about, your job, your goals, your routines, suddenly felt hollow. You couldn't explain why. It's not that anything went wrong. You just sense something isn't right. That's how it starts. That's how most people realize they're trapped in the rat race. But here's the twist: you don't escape it by running faster. You escape it by realizing it was never a race to begin with. And no one understood this better than Viktor Frankl. Frankl didn't write about escaping the rat race from a luxury apartment or a podcast mic. He wrote from inside a Nazi concentration camp, a place where every illusion of control, status, and material success was stripped away. And yet, he discovered something astonishing. Even when everything is taken from you, one thing always remains: your freedom to choose your attitude in any given set of circumstances. That's not a motivational quote. That's a weapon. A spiritual crowbar to pry yourself out of the mental prison most of us live in. But you might ask, what does this have to do with my 9 to 5, my student loans, or my endless to-do list? Everything. Because the rat race is not about work, it's about meaning. It's about believing that your worth is tied to performance, prestige, or productivity. Frankl's genius was realizing that meaning isn't found in success. It's found in responsibility, in purpose, in choosing to suffer for something greater than yourself. And that flips everything. It means you don't have to quit your job to be free. You have to quit believing that your job defines you. Let's try something radical. Right now, pause and ask yourself, if all my accomplishments were erased tomorrow, would I still know who I am? Most people wouldn't. Why? Because they never built an identity. They built a resume. Frankl saw this in the camps. Men who lost hope, who had no why to live for, collapsed. But those who had something, someone they loved, a future they believed in, a truth they refused to betray, they endured. Not because they were stronger, but because they were anchored.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
And you know what's wild? That same principle works in the modern world. You don't have to be in a camp or a crisis to use it. But you do have to stop chasing and start choosing. Start choosing what matters, what you'll suffer for, what you'll give your time to, not because it pays the most, but because it means the most. That's the nuclear bomb Frankl dropped on the rat race. Meaning is not something you wait for. It's something you will into existence by how you live. Now here's the part that stings. Most of us are terrified of freedom. We say we want to be free, but what we really want is comfort, certainty, and validation. Freedom is scary. It means responsibility. It means you can't blame your boss, your parents, or the system anymore. You have to own your choices. You have to find your why. And that's where most people quit. They'd rather run in circles than walk into the unknown. But what if I told you that the unknown is where your soul wakes up? Frankl said, life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose. That's not just poetic, that's practical. It means that even if your life looks like chaos on the outside, it can be radiant on the inside if you are living in service to something bigger than yourself. So let me ask you, what are you suffering for? Because if your answer is a paycheck, that's not suffering. That's slavery. And here's the twist: when you find your meaning, work stops being work. It becomes a form of expression. Even suffering becomes sacred. That's why Frankl titled his book Man's Search for Meaning, not Man's Search for Comfort. He understood that the highest human experience isn't pleasure, it's purpose. And nothing enslaves us more than mistaking the former for the latter. So how do we break out? We start by flipping the question. Instead of asking, "What do I want from life?" ask, "What does life want from me?" That's not passivity. That's partnership. It's realizing that you're not here to extract meaning from life like a miner with a pickaxe. You're here to respond to life like a musician to a song, listening, adjusting, playing your part. The moment you do that, the rat race dissolves. Not because your circumstances change, but because your orientation to life transforms. Let's get real for a second. How much of your life is about proving something? To your parents, to your peers, to yourself. That's not purpose. That's performance. And it's a trap. Because no matter how much you achieve, it's never enough. The rat race doesn't end with a gold medal. It ends with a question: was I true to myself? Frankl saw that question burned into every survivor's eyes. And here's the terrifying truth: some of them had nothing left but that question. And still, they found dignity. Because they answered it with courage, with integrity, with love. And if they could do it in hell, then what excuse do we have in our air-conditioned prisons of comfort? Let me ask you something. What would you still do, even if no one ever clapped for you again? That's where your purpose lies. Not in applause, not in awards, but in silent, sacred conviction. The kind that gets you up in the morning not because you have to, but because you choose to. Because your life isn't a race, it's a response. And here's the kicker: once you see that, you can never unsee it. You realize that freedom isn't found in escape, it's found in engagement. In committing to something so deeply that the chains of comparison, fear, and ego fall off like dead skin. Suddenly, life isn't about status. It's about service, not to the system, but to the soul. So maybe you're watching this on your break, in your car, between meetings. Maybe you feel stuck, like your life is on autopilot. Let me say this as clearly as I can: you are not stuck. You are just disconnected from your why. And the moment you reconnect, the world will feel different, not because it changed, but because you did. Frankl didn't survive the camps by being optimistic. He survived by being meaningful, by choosing to say yes to life, even when life said no to him. And that's the secret. That's the lesson. You don't need to quit your job or sell everything you own. You just need to ask every single day, what am I living for? And if the answer feels true, keep going. If it doesn't, change something. Because your life is too sacred to waste on a race that goes nowhere. And maybe, just maybe, the reason you're watching this video is because life is whispering something to you. Not yelling, whispering, wake up. This isn't it. There's more. And you know it. You've always known it. So what will you do now? The prison of comfort. Why most people never escape the life they secretly hate. We rarely talk about it, But comfort can be a kind of seduction so soft, so cozy, that we stop noticing how much it's slowly killing us. Most people who feel stuck aren't trapped by external forces. They're trapped by comfort. And here's the brutal truth. The greatest danger to a meaningful life isn't failure. It's success at the wrong things. Comfort becomes a prison when it lulls you into accepting a life you wouldn't consciously choose if you had to start over. This is why the rat race is so insidious. It disguises itself as progress. You get a better salary, or a better title, a better apartment. But deep inside, you feel smaller. You laugh less. You move slower. You start counting days instead of making them count. Have you ever stopped and asked, who am I becoming by following this path? Most never do. They're too busy climbing. But what if the ladder is leaning against the wrong wall? Frankl's insight comes crashing into this illusion like a wrecking ball. He reminds us that a life without meaning, no matter how comfortable, is still a form of spiritual starvation. It's like eating sugar when your soul is craving protein. The taste might distract you, but it doesn't nourish you. And over time, the emptiness grows louder. You start to feel it in quiet moments on Sunday nights, during long commutes, in the silence between your achievements. That's not boredom. That's your soul begging you to stop numbing and start listening. But here's the catch. Escaping this prison requires pain. Not suffering for suffering's sake, but the kind of pain that signals growth. Like a muscle tearing so it can rebuild stronger. The reason most people stay stuck is because they confuse discomfort with danger. But Frankl taught us something radical. Suffering is not the enemy. Meaningless suffering is. When you suffer for something you believe in, it's no longer agony, it's transformation. Let's make this personal. Think about the last time you were deeply fulfilled. Not entertained, not distracted, fulfilled. Was it because everything was easy? Or was it because you were stretched, challenged, demanded to give more of yourself than you thought you had? That's the paradox. Meaning often hides inside struggle. It's not where we want to look, but it's where the gold is buried. Frankl called this the tragic triad: pain, guilt, and death. He didn't avoid these things. He leaned into them, because he knew that confronting them, rather than escaping them, is how we become fully alive. Pain reminds us of what we care about. Guilt shows us where we've betrayed our values. And death? Death makes everything urgent. It's the final punctuation mark that forces us to decide, what will I do with the time I've been given? You see, the rat race tells us that time is money. That's a lie. Time is life. And it's slipping through your fingers right now. Every hour spent chasing approval is an hour not spent building a soul. Every day you delay your calling is a day you feed the machine instead of your mission. And that's the real cost of comfort. It steals your urgency. So I'll ask again, what are you living for? And don't give me the pretty answer. Give me the real one. Is it security? Is it admiration? Is it not disappointing your parents? Be honest. Because until you face the truth, you'll keep running in circles, decorating your cage instead of escaping it. Frankl's life shows us that even in the worst conditions imaginable, a person can still choose dignity, still choose purpose, still affirm life. And yet here we are, in the freest society in history, and we're paralyzed by Netflix queues and social media likes. We've confused liberty with lethargy. But freedom isn't the ability to do whatever you want. It's the power to do what you must. And that's what meaning demands. It doesn't beg. It doesn't seduce. It summons. It calls you to sacrifice, to risk, to walk away from ease and toward essence. That's why so few accept the call, because it doesn't promise happiness. It promises wholeness, and wholeness is messy. It means facing your shadows, reclaiming your pain, and living in alignment with truths that might isolate you. But here's the miracle. When you do that, when you step into your real life, the one you were meant to live, not the one you were sold, you stop envying people. You stop comparing. You stop performing. Because you found something no one can take from you, a reason to exist. That's what Frankl discovered. That's what we've forgotten. So let's get even more real. Think about your daily routine, the emails, the meetings, the scrolling, the errands. How much of it is aligned with your deepest values? How much of it is just inertia, things you do because you did them yesterday? If you had to defend your life to your future self, could you? Or would you break down and confess, I was too scared to change? This is not about guilt. It's about awakening. Because once you realize that your life is not a rehearsal, everything sharpens. The fog lifts. You start to see trade-offs more clearly. You stop saying yes to things that steal your soul for a paycheck. You start saying no, not out of rebellion, but out of reverence. Reverence for the one life you've been given. And that's where the magic happens. That's when the rat race becomes irrelevant. Because you're no longer trying to win a game you never chose. You're playing a different game altogether. One where the scoreboard is not money, likes, or titles, but meaning, depth, and integrity. Frankl once wrote, when a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. That line should haunt us, because it describes so much of modern life. We're not thriving, we're anesthetizing. But distraction is a poor substitute for destiny. And sooner or later, the noise fades. And you're left with the quiet question, did I live true? So here's a challenge. For 1 week, live as if your life is your message. Every conversation, every action, every choice, make it a reflection of who you truly are. You'll feel exposed, vulnerable, but you'll also feel alive, because you're finally living in alignment, not just ambition. And if you fail, good. Failure means you tried something real. It means you stepped out of the prison of comfort and into the arena of meaning. That's where transformation begins. That's where Frankl lived. Not in safety, but in significance. So let's stop pretending we're confused. We know what matters. We've always known. The question is, will we choose it, even when it costs us? The sacred yes. How to build a life so meaningful you'd live it twice. There's a moment in every soul's journey when you stop asking, "What should I do?" and start asking, "What must I do?" That's the shift. That's when the fog clears. That's where the sacred yes begins. It's not a career move. It's not a goal. It's not even a dream. It's a direction, a calling that runs so deep it feels like remembering something you never learned. And once you hear it, you can't unhear it. Frankl understood this intimately. In the concentration camps, when all worldly paths were blocked, that deeper yes was all he had. And it was enough. He chose to say yes to life, to meaning, even when life said no to him. That's what saved him, not success, not luck, not talent, purpose. An unshakable, burning yes to something greater than himself. And that's the paradox. Most of us are looking for freedom in more options. But real freedom is found in commitment. In choosing one thing so fully, so fiercely, that everything else becomes noise. You don't need 1,000 paths. You need the right one. The one that's yours. The one you'd walk barefoot in the dark just to keep going. But here's the hard truth. The sacred yes demands sacrifice. You can't say yes to your soul without saying no to your ego, no to validation, no to people-pleasing, no to the illusion of a perfect plan. And that's terrifying, because we've been taught to fear uncertainty. But Frankl flipped that on its head. He said, it did not really matter what we expected from life, but rather what life expected from us. Think about that. What if your life isn't a riddle to be solved, but a message to be answered? What if your deepest fulfillment comes not from getting what you want, but from becoming who you were meant to be? That's not philosophy. That's liberation. Let's get practical. You might be wondering, how do I find my sacred yes? The answer isn't out there. It's in here. It's in your pain, your longing, your rage, your story. Frankl believed that meaning is discovered in 3 ways: through work, through love, and through suffering. Not one of those is easy, but all of them are real. Start with your suffering. What have you endured that broke you open? What wounds still ache in the silence? That's not weakness. That's raw material. That's compost for growth. The places you've bled are often where your mission begins. Because when you've suffered deeply, you can serve deeply. You've earned empathy. You've earned insight. You've earned your voice. Then look at your love. What do you love so much that it scares you? What would you protect at all costs? That's your compass. Not just romantic love, but sacred love, love for truth, for beauty, for justice, for creation. Frankl wrote that love is the ultimate and highest goal to which man can aspire. Why? Because when we love, we transcend ourselves. We dissolve the ego. We serve something infinite. And finally, your work. Not just your job, but your offering. What do you feel born to give? What task, when you do it, makes time disappear? That's your zone of purpose. It might not look glamorous. It might not pay well. But if it feeds your soul, it's holy. Don't ignore it just because it doesn't fit the mold. The mold was never made for your soul. So now, let's bring this home. Imagine you stripped away every external pressure, no expectations, no judgment, no fear. What would you do with your life? Not someday. Now, what would you build? What would you protect? What would you fight for? That's your sacred yes whispering through the noise. And it's waiting for your answer. But answering isn't a one-time event. It's a daily discipline. It's choosing, again and again, to align with what matters, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, because that's what makes it sacred. Anyone can drift into comfort, but to live with meaning, that takes courage, that takes fire, that takes you. And I'll be honest, it's lonely sometimes. When you start living aligned with your sacred yes, you'll lose things. You'll lose approval. You'll lose certainty. You might even lose relationships that were built on your silence. But what you'll gain is worth everything, yourself. And once you have that, you're untouchable. That's what Frankl meant when he said that even in a concentration camp, man could choose his attitude. He could say yes to life, even in the face of death. And that means you can say yes to life in your boardroom, your apartment, your school, your quiet evenings. You don't have to be in crisis to awaken. You just have to stop waiting. So here's the final, unfiltered truth. The rat race ends the moment you say yes to your soul, not to your comfort, not to your goals, to your soul. That part of you that knows this life is sacred. That time is short. That love is real. That truth is worth suffering for. And when you live from that place, when your life becomes a living, breathing yes, something miraculous happens. The world opens, not because it changed, but because you did. You stop seeing obstacles. You start seeing invitations. You stop chasing happiness. You start embodying purpose. You stop counting time. You start honoring it.